The rain fell heavily over Lagos, drumming on rooftops, flooding the narrow streets, and turning the night into a restless ocean of noise. In Victoria Island, the city's glittering towers pierced the storm, lights flickering like tired stars, their shine dulled by the weight of the weather. Inside one of the tallest buildings, a woman stood at the edge of her penthouse balcony. The city stretched beneath her like a broken mirror. Her name was Clara, 32 years old, the daughter of wealthy parents and now the widow of a man who had left her with more scars than memories. To the world, she was untouchable, a billionaire businesswoman, draped in wealth, adorned in diamonds, the envy of Lagos socialites. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, she stood barefoot on the cold marble, her silk gown clinging to her soaked body, her hand resting on her swollen belly. 9 months pregnant and utterly alone. Lightning cracked across the night sky, casting her in pale flashes of light. Her face, beautiful, sharp, but tired, reflected sorrow deeper than the storm. In her chest, despair pressed against her lungs until breathing felt like punishment. She whispered into the wind, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore." Her tears mingled with the rain. The voices of betrayal echoed in her mind. Her husband's lies, her family's greed, the way even her closest friends had abandoned her when the rumors started. They said she was cursed, that no good could come from her pregnancy, that her child would destroy her legacy. She stepped forward, her toes hanging over the slick balcony edge. Below, the city blurred in the rain. Lights, cars, the faint sound of horns. A world that seemed far away, uncaring, ready to forget her as soon as she was gone. And then, a voice. "Madam, please don't." It was low, almost drowned by the storm, but it reached her like a hand pulling her back. Clara froze. She turned her head, water dripping from her lashes, and saw him. A man stood near the glass door of the balcony, drenched to the bone. His clothes were torn, his hair matted with rain. His eyes, tired, but burning with a strange light, were fixed on her. He looked like someone the city had forgotten. A beggar, someone who belonged to the crowded underbridges and bus stops, not in the polished glass heights of Victoria Island. Clara's breath caught. Her first thought was fear. How had he gotten past security? But her second thought, stronger and stranger, was that he had been meant to be here. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice cracking. The man didn't move closer. Instead, he raised both hands slowly, as though trying to calm a frightened child. His voice shook, not from weakness, but from something heavier. "My name is Daniel. Please, step away from there. Whatever pain you're carrying, it is not stronger than you." Clara laughed bitterly, though the sound was closer to a sob. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've lost." Daniel's eyes glistened under the rain. He tilted his head slightly, as though he could see past her words into the depth of her heart. "Maybe not, but I know loss. I know hunger. I know what it means to want the earth to swallow you whole. But I also know this." He pointed, not at her, but at her belly, the swell of her unborn child under the thin silk. "That life inside you is not only yours. It is waiting to be born. It is waiting to change things you cannot yet see." Clara's lips trembled. A part of her wanted to scream at him to leave. Another part of her, the part that had carried her child through endless nights of loneliness, wanted to believe. The storm raged. The marble beneath her feet grew more slippery. She swayed slightly, and Daniel instinctively stepped forward. His hand reached out, not touching her, just close enough that the heat of it cut through the cold. "Please," he whispered again. "Step down. If you end it tonight, you will never know what that child was sent here to do. And maybe you were born for this moment, to bring them here safely." The words pierced her like lightning. Clara blinked hard, and the world wavered through her tears. Her breath came in shuddering gasps. Finally, with a trembling step, she moved back from the edge. Her knees gave way, and she collapsed onto the wet marble, sobbing into her hands. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, his own body shaking from cold and exhaustion. For a long while, neither spoke. The storm howled around them, but inside that balcony, there was only the sound of Clara's grief breaking open. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost childlike. Why did you stop me?" Daniel's gaze fell on her belly again, and for a brief second, his eyes seemed to flicker with something strange, something beyond human. "Because I saw a light when I looked at you, and when I touched the railing just now, I saw more than rain and night. I saw a child who will live. And I saw darkness that wants to stop it. Clara's heart skipped. She turned her face toward him, searching his weathered features for a lie, for madness, for anything but the weight of truth. But his eyes, tired, scarred, and yet burning with a quiet fire, held steady. The storm outside roared louder, as though it too listened. And for the first time in months, Clara felt something other than despair. She felt fear, but not of death. Fear of the unknown path that had just begun. And for the first time since her world had crumbled, Clara did not dream of death. She dreamed of dawn. The morning came quietly, though Lagos never truly slept. Even before the sun rose, the sound of engines, of hawkers shouting, of church bells and mosque calls, folded together in a symphony of restless survival. Clara awoke to the smell of burning firewood and the low murmur of voices. She blinked against the light breaking through holes in the makeshift roof. For a moment, confusion clouded her. Then memory returned in a rush. The bridge, the despair, the beggar who had pulled her back from the edge. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. Emeka was nearby, crouched at the fire pit, stirring a dented tin pot. The liquid inside steamed faintly. He noticed her movement and smiled with quiet reassurance. "You slept well?" he asked. Clara rubbed her eyes, embarrassed. Her silk blouse was wrinkled, her hair tangled, her skin sticky with the humid night. She had never looked, or felt, so out of place. I think so," she admitted, her voice low. Emeka poured a small portion of the steaming liquid into a rusted metal cup and handed it to her. "It is not much. Just tea leaves from the market, boiled in water. But it warms the body." Clara hesitated, staring at the cup. The edges were blackened, chipped. Her old self would never have touched it. But she was no longer her old self. She accepted the cup, sipping slowly. The bitter taste spread across her tongue, harsh but strangely grounding. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, sipping from a tin of his own. Around them, other homeless souls stirred awake, some leaving to roam the streets in search of scraps, others sitting in silence. A little girl with matted hair approached Clara shyly, staring at her expensive wristwatch. Clara managed a small smile, removing the watch and placing it in the girl's hand. The child's eyes widened with wonder before she scampered away. Emeka raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Clara caught his gaze. "What uses time to me anymore?" Emeka's expression softened. "Time is not for you alone. It belongs also to the life you carry." The words pierced her again. She placed her hand instinctively over her belly. No one else in the room knew she was pregnant, but Emeka's quiet perception unsettled her. "How did you?" He shrugged. "I see things in people. Pain has a way of teaching you to look deeper than the surface." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the bustle of Lagos grew louder. Traffic horns, sellers hawking bread, the rhythmic calls of bus conductors. Clara wondered if the world would recognize her if she stepped out now. Would they see the billionaire's widow who had lost everything, or just another woman blending into the crowd? By midday, Clara felt restless. She rose, brushing the dust from her clothes. "I need to go." Emeka looked up. "Go where?" "I don't know. Anywhere but here." He studied her for a long moment. "The city is not kind to those without direction. If you walk without knowing where you are going, Lagos will eat you alive." She wanted to argue, to tell him she had survived boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her, journalists who shredded her reputation, investors who turned their backs on her. But she could not deny the truth in his eyes. She had no plan, no home, no family to run to. "Then what should I do?" she asked bitterly. Emeka stood, his frame tall though gaunt. "Stay? For now. Watch. Learn. Survival is an art. Perhaps you will find what you are meant for." Clara almost laughed. What could she possibly learn from beggars huddled under ruins? But the memory of the bridge held her back. If not for this man, she would already be gone. Reluctantly, she sat again. The day unfolded slowly. Clara watched as Emeka moved through the streets with practiced rhythm. He greeted shopkeepers by name, exchanged banter with bus conductors, helped an old blind man cross the road. People looked at him with recognition, not pity. Even in rags, he commanded a strange respect. By evening, Clara had followed him into a crowded market. The air was alive with voices, colors, smells, fried plantains sizzling in oil, the sharp tang of spices, the sweet rot of overripe mangoes. Clara felt dizzy. Emeka carried himself with ease, weaving through the chaos. "You see," he said, gesturing at the crowd. "Here, every person is fighting for one thing, tomorrow. Rich or poor, it is the same hunger. The only difference is who learns how to feed it." Clara's chest tightened. Tomorrow. She had not thought beyond the night, when she had almost ended it all. As they returned to the ruins under the bridge, thunder rolled again across the Lagos sky. Clara looked at Emeka, curiosity gnawing at her. "Why did you really save me? Was it just pity?" He stopped walking. The streetlight flickered above them, casting shadows across his scarred face. "Not pity. I saw something in you that night. A fight not yet finished. And something else." "What?" she whispered. His voice dropped lower, almost like a confession. "Destiny." The word lingered in the humid air. Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to dismiss it, to call it nonsense. But deep down, she knew he was right. Something had shifted when he pulled her back from the bridge. That night, as rain poured once more, Clara lay awake on the mat Emeka had given her. She listened to the breathing of the others, the sound of dripping water, the distant throb of nightlife across the lagoon. Her mind spun with questions she could not silence. What destiny could remain for a woman stripped of wealth, mocked by headlines, abandoned by friends? And why had a beggar been the one to remind her that life was not yet finished? Sleep came only in fragments, filled with restless dreams, dreams of bridges, of rivers, of unseen hands pulling her back again and again. When dawn broke, she knew one thing for certain. Her life had not ended on that bridge. It had only begun, and the man named Emeka, with his scars and riddles, was part of that beginning. Days blurred into one another. Clara found herself learning rhythms she had never known. How to stretch a loaf of bread to feed 3 mouths. How to wash clothes in the lagoon without losing them to the current. How to walk with lowered eyes so hawkers and hustlers would not mark her as prey. Lagos, in its relentless hum, became her teacher. Emeka was her guide. He spoke little of himself, but the city seemed to speak for him. Everywhere they went, someone knew his name. A meat seller at the market handed him a piece of suya without asking for money. A conductor waved him onto a Danfo bus when he had no fare. A policeman on patrol nodded at him with quiet familiarity. Clara noticed the pattern. "You've lived in every corner of this city, haven't you?" Emeka only smiled faintly. "When the streets are your home, you learn to belong everywhere and nowhere." The answer unsettled her, but it also made her curious. Who was he before the streets? She wanted to ask more, but Emeka always turned the conversation back to her. He asked about her late husband, about the company they once ran together, about the child growing inside her. He listened without judgment, his eyes steady even when she confessed things that shamed her. One evening, as they sat by the fire beneath the bridge, she asked, "Do you ever wish your life had been different?" Emeka looked into the flames for a long time before answering. "I used to, but I learned that wishing is a slow kind of death. The city doesn't care about your wishes. It cares about your will." His words struck her like the tolling of a bell. Clara thought of all the nights she had wished for her old life back. All the mornings she had wished she had the courage to end it. Wishing had indeed been killing her slowly. From that night, she tried to do as Emeka did, to stop wishing and to start willing. But Lagos had its own way of testing her resolve. One afternoon, Clara ventured into Balogun Market alone, determined to trade the few valuables she still carried for necessities. She clutched a small handbag. Inside, a gold bracelet from her wedding day, the last piece of her old life she had not surrendered. The market was a living creature, stalls pressed shoulder to shoulder, voices rising in competing pitches, the air thick with roasted corn, sweat, and exhaust fumes. Clara felt the crowd pressing around her like waves, threatening to swallow her whole. "Fine madam, buy cloth. Fresh fish here. Sweet oranges, only 100. She pushed forward, her knuckles white against the strap of her bag. A jeweler's stall caught her eye. The man behind the counter had sharp eyes, but kind features. She hesitated before approaching. The moment she opened the bag, 2 boys darted from the crowd. One yanked the strap, the other shoved her to the ground. Clara cried out, clutching desperately to the bag as people shouted, "Thief! Catch them!" The boys vanished into the maze of stalls, her bag torn from her hands. Clara sat stunned on the dirt, her knees scraped, her chest heaving. The bracelet, the last thing she had of her husband, was gone. Tears blurred her vision, But before despair could overwhelm her, a hand reached down. Emeka stood above her, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing. He must have followed her unseen. "Get up," he said firmly. "Do not let the city break you this way." Clara's throat tightened. "They took everything. It was all I had left." Emeka pulled her to her feet. "No, what you have left is breath. As long as you breathe, nothing is finished." The words were simple, yet they rooted themselves deep inside her. Breath. That was enough to begin again. Weeks passed. Clara no longer flinched at the chaos of Lagos. She walked the streets with more certainty, learned the shortcuts through alleys, discovered the places where beggars could find food or shelter. She even laughed, sometimes, at Emeka's dry humor or the antics of the children who played barefoot under the bridge. Her belly grew rounder, and with it, her fear. Nights brought dreams of drowning, of being swallowed by rivers that looked like Lagos Lagoon. But every morning, Emeka was there, steady as the sunrise. One evening, as they sat side by side, Clara finally asked the question that had haunted her since the bridge. "Why did you really stop me? Not just because you saw destiny. What did you mean?" Emeka's face was shadowed by the firelight. His voice was quiet. "Because once, long ago, someone saved me the same way, and I failed to save them back. I will not fail again." Clara stared at him, stunned. He never explained further, but the pain in his eyes was answer enough. That night, as she lay awake listening to the city, Clara realized something. She was no longer surviving only for herself. She was surviving because someone else had tied their hope to hers. And for the first time, she wanted to live, not just to breathe. The rains came harder that season, flooding the streets, turning markets into rivers. One stormy night, lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the pillars of the bridge. The homeless huddled together, frightened. Clara clutched her belly, wincing at a sudden, sharp pain. Emeka noticed instantly. "Clara? What is it?" Her breath caught. "The baby, it's too soon." Another pain ripped through her. Panic surged. The others gathered, their faces etched with fear. No one knew what to do. Emeka knelt beside her, his hands steady. "Listen to me. You are stronger than you know. But we cannot do this here. We need help." The rain hammered down as he lifted her, carrying her into the storm. Clara cried out, each contraction worse than the last. The city blurred, headlights, honking horns, rushing water. Finally, Emeka pushed through the doors of a small roadside clinic. The nurses gasped at the sight of a soaked beggar carrying a pregnant woman in torn clothes. Without hesitation, they rushed her inside. Clara gripped Emeka's hand as they wheeled her away. "Don't leave me," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "I will not leave. Not this time." Hours blurred into pain and cries, the storm outside echoing her labor. And then, at last, a sound cut through the chaos, the cry of a newborn. Clara collapsed back, tears streaming down her face as the nurse placed the baby in her arms. A girl, small, fragile, yet alive. Emeka stood at the doorway, soaked and trembling, his eyes shining with something between awe and relief. Clara looked up at him, her voice hoarse but filled with wonder. "Her name will be Hope." The word carried through the small room, soft but unshakable. And in that moment, as lightning flashed across Lagos, Clara felt something she thought she had lost forever: faith. Not in riches, not in reputation, but in the fragile, fierce miracle of survival. Clara whispered the words again and again as if they were a prayer. Hope slept in her arms, swaddled in a thin hospital cloth that smelled faintly of antiseptic and smoke from the generator outside. For the first time in months, the silence in her chest was gone. There was a heartbeat not just inside her body, but in the tiny bundle breathing softly against her. But Lagos did not pause for miracles. The nurses urged her to rest, but Clara saw the way they looked at her: torn clothes, sunken cheeks, and no money to her name. Their politeness was thin, worn at the edges. She understood. Lagos was not kind to those who could not pay. When Emeka stepped outside the room to speak with the head nurse, Clara listened. "Madam, she cannot stay," the nurse said flatly. "We are not running a charity. She has no family here, no money, nothing. She just gave birth." Emeka countered, his voice rough but steady. "At least let her stay the night." The nurse sighed, lowering her voice. "The bill is already more than she can cover. If she stays longer, we'll have no choice but to call social services. You know what that means. They'll take the baby." Clara's chest tightened. She pulled Hope closer, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead as tears burned her eyes. Take the baby? Over her dead body. When Emeka returned, he didn't speak. He simply helped her dress, then carried Hope in one arm while guiding Clara with the other. They stepped into the rain-soaked night once more. The city had swallowed her whole, but it had also given her this: hope, and the man who refused to leave her behind. They returned to the underbridge shelter, where faces lit up at the sight of the child. Women clucked with admiration, men offered quiet congratulations, and children gathered around with wide eyes. Her name is Hope, Clara said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. One old woman smiled toothlessly. Hope born in the storm. Lagos children are like that, hard to kill. The words were meant as comfort, but Clara felt a chill. Because deep down, she knew storms never left without leaving something behind. That night, as the community settled, Clara cradled Hope close. But when she finally closed her eyes, her dreams were not of peace. She saw fire licking the pillars of the bridge. She saw Hope crying, her voice echoing through the city like a siren. She saw hands reaching for her child, rich hands, desperate hands, hands dripping with blood. And in the middle of the vision stood Emeka, his scars glowing faintly in the dark. She woke with a cry, her body drenched in sweat. Emeka was already awake, sitting by the dying fire, watching her. What did you see? He asked quietly. Clara hesitated. I saw her in danger. I saw you. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. The days that followed should have been filled with small joys. The first cries of the baby, the community's affection, the rhythm of new motherhood. But Clara felt the dream clinging to her like a second skin. Strange things began to happen. Hope was no ordinary infant. She hardly ever cried, except at night, when the city was quiet. And when she did, her wail carried farther than it should have, echoing through the concrete jungle like a haunting call. People noticed. Your baby has a powerful voice, one man said with a nervous laugh. Even the stray dogs stop when she cries. But others whispered. An old beggar muttered about omens. A woman selling akara swore she saw shadows stir whenever the child whimpered. Clara dismissed it at first, until she noticed it herself. One evening, as Hope cried softly, the wind picked up. Plastic bags and scraps of paper whirled into the air, spinning in circles around the bridge. The firelight flickered, and every head turned. Clara's blood ran cold. Emeka stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Take her inside, he said firmly. Now. Clara obeyed, clutching the baby to her chest. Inside the small shack, she rocked Hope, whispering, You are just a child. Just a child. But deep down, she feared that was a lie. As weeks passed, the whispers grew louder. Babies cry, but not like this one, someone said. She was born in a storm. Maybe she carries it inside her. I heard her cry, and my dead brother's name came to my mind. Clara wanted to scream at them to stop, but fear chained her voice. Because part of her believed them. And then one night, everything changed. It began like before, Hope's wail splitting the silence. But this time, the sound was different. It rose higher, sharper, until it seemed to pierce the sky. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The homeless scattered, some crying out in terror. Clara held Hope, her own body shaking. Then she saw it. From the shadows beneath the bridge, figures emerged, dark outlines, taller than men, their eyes burning faintly red. They moved with the slow, deliberate grace of predators. Clara's breath caught in her throat. What are they? Emeka stepped in front of her, his shoulders squared, his voice calm but firm. They are what Lagos hides when the lights go out. The creatures circled, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. One leaned closer, its voice scraping through the air. The child is not meant for you. She belongs to us. Clara's scream tore through the night. She clutched Hope so tightly the baby's cry cut off in shock. Emeka raised his arms, scars glowing faintly in the moonlight. No, he said. She is under my protection. The air pulsed, heavy with unseen power. The creatures recoiled, hissing, but did not vanish. And Clara knew. This was the beginning of a battle far greater than survival. She looked at Emeka, fear and desperation flooding her. Who are you really? He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the shadows. The truth was written in the lines of his face, in the way the night seemed to bend around him. The man who had saved her was not just a beggar. He was something else. And the city, with all its secrets, was about to reveal what that meant. The air under the bridge thickened, charged with a weight that pressed against Clara's chest. The shadows writhed like smoke-given flesh, circling closer. Their whispers tangled with the night, chilling her blood. Emeka stood firm, his scarred arms raised as if he were holding back an invisible tide. His eyes glimmered faintly, not with fear, but with something older, something that unsettled Clara as much as it comforted her. "Stay behind me," he murmured, voice steady even as the ground shivered beneath their feet. But Clara could hardly breathe. Her heart hammered as she held Hope tighter, the child now silent, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness as though she recognized it. One of the creatures stepped forward, its form clearer in the weak light. It was tall, its skin like stretched ash, its teeth too sharp for its mouth. Its voice was a guttural rasp. "The child carries the storm. She belongs to us. Hand her over, and you may yet see another dawn." Clara's knees buckled. "No," she whispered, clutching Hope to her chest. "She's mine." The creature's gaze slid past her, locking onto Emeka. You should not interfere. You were warned long ago." The scars on Emeka's arms pulsed with faint light, each line glowing like embers carved into flesh. His jaw tightened. "And still I stand. You will not touch her." A hiss spread through the shadows, like steam escaping 1,000 pipes. The other figures surged closer, their movements jerky, unnatural. Clara staggered back, trembling. "Emeka, what are you?" He didn't turn to her. His eyes stayed fixed on the approaching threat. A man who made a bargain, and a man who has spent every day since breaking it. The words made no sense to Clara, but the power in them did. This was no ordinary man. Emeka's hand dropped to the ground. He pressed his palm against the wet concrete, and the earth answered. The bridge above groaned, and a line of fire snaked outward from his touch, forming a glowing barrier between them and the creatures. The shadows recoiled with shrieks, their shapes rippling as if the fire burned their very essence. But they did not retreat. One hurled itself against the barrier, sparks flying as it collided with the unseen wall. Another followed, then another, their cries filling the night like tortured echoes. Clara's body shook as she clutched Hope, rocking her instinctively though the child remained eerily silent. Her baby's eyes were locked on the creatures, unblinking, as if she knew them. Emeka gritted his teeth, sweat rolling down his scarred face. The light from his arms flared brighter, feeding the barrier, but Clara saw his legs trembling under the strain. "How long can you hold them?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Long enough," he muttered. "If you run." "Run where?" Clara snapped, panic breaking through her fear. "This is Lagos. There's nowhere to hide from." She gestured wildly at the shadows clawing at the barrier. "From whatever they are." Emeka's gaze flicked to her, sharp and unyielding. "The church," he said. "Ikoyi. An old cathedral. If you can reach it, the walls will protect her." "The church." Clara's laugh was hollow, desperate. "I don't even have transport fare. You think I can carry a baby across this city with?" "Clara," Emeka barked, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade. "If you don't, she dies. And so do you." The barrier flared as another creature hurled itself against it, sparks showering like shattered stars. Clara's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She wanted to collapse, to hide, to scream until the city swallowed her whole. But when she looked down at Hope, at her tiny face, her wide, unsettlingly calm eyes, she knew she couldn't. She had nothing. No money, no family, no home. But she had this child. And somehow, she had to save her. The barrier cracked. Clara flinched as the fire split, a jagged fissure tearing through the glowing line. The creatures roared, surging forward. Emeka slammed his hands together, his scars blazing brighter than ever. The barrier sealed, but his body shuddered violently. Blood dripped from his nose, his knees nearly giving way. "You have to go," he gasped, his voice raw. "Now." Clara stepped back, torn between fear and the pull of his words. "What about you?" He gave a grim smile, lips stained with blood. "I'll buy you time." The crackling barrier, the shrieking shadows, the storm in her baby's eyes, it all pressed down on Clara at once. She wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that she couldn't do this alone, that she couldn't be asked to carry a destiny she never chose. But Lagos had never cared for fairness. With trembling arms, she clutched Hope tighter, whispering into her daughter's ear, "We'll make it. I don't know how, but we'll make it." Then she turned and ran. The city stretched before her like a labyrinth. Rain pelted the streets, headlights smeared across the wet asphalt, horns blaring into the night. Clara sprinted barefoot, her legs weak from childbirth, every step a lance of pain. Behind her, the bridge trembled with inhuman screams. She ducked into an alley, hope pressed against her chest, her breath ragged. "Just hold on," she whispered. "Hold on, my love." But the city seemed alive with pursuit. In every shadow, she felt eyes. In every gust of wind, she heard whispers. Once, she glimpsed a figure darting across the rooftops, too fast to be human. Another time, she saw a reflection in a puddle that wasn't her own. The storm that had birthed her child had not ended. It had only followed her. She stumbled onto a main road, nearly colliding with a Danfo bus screeching to a halt. The driver cursed loudly, but Clara barely heard him. She flagged him down desperately. "Please, Ikoyi, Cathedral." The driver eyed her ragged state, the newborn clutched in her arms, and shook his head. "This is not a charity. Enter with your fare or move aside." Clara's heart dropped. She fumbled in her pockets, finding nothing but lint. "Please," she begged, voice breaking. "It's life or death." The passengers jeered, some shouting for the driver to move. But one old woman near the front squinted at Clara, her gaze sharp. "Driver, open the door," she said. "Let her in. Can't you see death is chasing her?" A murmur rippled through the bus. The driver hesitated, then grudgingly opened the door. Clara staggered inside, clutching Hope tightly, ignoring the stares. She collapsed onto a seat, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The bus lurched forward, the city rushing past in streaks of neon and shadow. For a moment, Clara let herself breathe, but as she glanced out the window, her heart froze. In the reflection of the glass, she saw them, dark shapes running alongside the bus, their red eyes glowing. They weren't letting her go. She whispered to Hope, though her voice shook. "We'll get there. We'll make it." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Because the war had already begun, and Lagos, with all its secrets, was the battlefield. The Danfo rattled through the slick streets, its engine groaning as it carried Clara and her child deeper into the night. Each bump in the road jolted her body, but she held on to Hope with desperate strength. The baby's eyes were wide, unblinking, still staring into the shadows beyond the glass as though she alone understood what hunted them. The passengers whispered among themselves, some sneaking wary glances at Clara, others pretending she wasn't there. Lagos was full of stories, full of broken souls. Yet even in a city that saw everything, there was something in Clara's presence that unsettled them. The old woman who had spoken for her earlier leaned forward, her eyes sharp despite the lines of age etched across her face. "Child," she said softly, "where are you taking that baby?" Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to tell the truth, that creatures from the dark were chasing them, that the world had shifted on the night of Hope's birth, that every shadow now felt alive. But the words wouldn't come. She knew they would sound like madness. "To the church," she said instead, her voice trembling. "Ikoyi Cathedral." The old woman nodded slowly, her gaze flickering to the window. "Good. That is holy ground. If anything will keep her safe, it is there." Clara blinked. "You believe me?" "I don't need to believe you," the woman replied, her voice low. "I can smell the war on you, and I can see it in her eyes." She gestured toward Hope. "That child is not ordinary." Before Clara could answer, the bus jolted violently. The driver cursed, wrestling with the wheel. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Clara saw it. A dark figure standing in the middle of the road, taller than any man, its skin rippling like smoke. The driver swerved sharply, the bus skidding across the wet asphalt. Passengers screamed as the vehicle lurched dangerously close to the edge of the road before screeching to a halt. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, watching them. And then, with a sound like tearing cloth, it split into three. The passengers panicked, some shouting prayers, others clawing at the door to escape. The driver fumbled with the ignition, trying to restart the stalled engine, sweat pouring down his face. Clara's heart slammed in her chest. She clutched Hope tighter, rocking her instinctively. "Please," she whispered. "Please, just get us to the church." But the figures were already moving, gliding toward the bus without touching the ground. Their eyes burned red, and with every step, the lights of the city seemed to flicker. The old woman beside Clara began to chant, her voice rhythmic and strong despite her frail frame. Her hands traced patterns in the air, old signs Clara didn't recognize. The shadows slowed, their movements jerky, as though the woman's words pressed against them. "Stay behind me," the woman told Clara, her voice steady. "Keep the child close." The bus finally roared back to life, the driver stomping on the accelerator. The vehicle shot forward, swerving past the figures, who shrieked as the old woman's chants echoed into the rain. Clara turned, looking through the back window as the shadows melted into the night. But she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The bus barreled into a coyi, its passengers shaken and silent. Clara's entire body ached, her arms numb from holding hope so tightly, but she refused to let go. Every corner they turned, she expected the shadows to reappear. Finally, the cathedral came into view. It loomed against the skyline, its spires reaching toward the storm clouds, its old stone walls glistening with rain. For the first time that night, Clara felt a flicker of hope. The bus screeched to a halt, and she stumbled out, clutching her baby. The old woman followed, her chants still whispering under her breath. "Go," she urged Clara. "Do not stop." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. She ran toward the heavy wooden doors of the cathedral, her bare feet slapping against the wet stone. She pushed with all her strength, the doors groaning open. Inside, the air was cool and still, the silence broken only by the faint echo of her footsteps. The space was vast, shadows stretching across the vaulted ceiling, stained glass windows glowing faintly with the city lights beyond. She collapsed onto a pew, her body shaking. For the first time since the night began, she let herself cry openly, sobs racking her chest. Hope remained silent in her arms, her wide eyes fixed on the altar. Clara wiped her face, breathing hard. "We made it," she whispered. "We're safe now." But even as the words left her lips, she felt it, a ripple in the air, a shiver that ran through the stone. The church was holy ground, but it was also old, and old places had their own secrets. The candles on the altar flickered though there was no wind. The great wooden doors groaned shut on their own. Clara's heart clenched. She looked around, fear gnawing at her chest. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing through the cathedral. "Is anyone here?" Her words vanished into the silence. Then hope stirred. The baby lifted her tiny hand, pointing toward the altar. Clara's stomach twisted. Slowly, she followed her daughter's gaze. A figure stood there. It was not one of the shadows. This was different. The figure was cloaked in white, its face hidden, its presence heavy and commanding. It did not move, but Clara felt its eyes on her, piercing, unrelenting. Her body froze. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to obey. Then the figure spoke, its voice neither male nor female, but layered, as though many spoke through one. "The child is marked," it said, "and so are you." Clara clutched Hope tighter, her heart thundering. "Please," she whispered. "I don't understand. What do you want from us?" The figure lifted a hand, pointing toward the child. "Not what I want. What she is." Hope blinked, her tiny face serene. And for the first time, Clara thought she saw something move behind her daughter's eyes. Not just light, not just reflection, but depth, endless and terrifying. "She will be the beginning," the figure said. "Or the end." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The end of what? The figure tilted its head, as if listening to something far away. Then it stepped back, its form dissolving into mist. The candles snuffed out, plunging the cathedral into darkness. And in that darkness, Clara heard the whispers return. The shadows had followed her. And this time, there would be no running. Outside, the storm raged harder, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rattling the old stones. Inside the cathedral, Clara stood trembling, her child in her arms, the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. The whispers grew louder, closer, until they were all around her. She spun in place, eyes wide, trying to track them. And then the doors burst open. Emeka staggered inside, his body battered, his scars blazing with faint light. Blood streaked his face, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with determination. "You made it," he said hoarsely, limping toward her. "Good." Then we make our stand here. Clara's tears returned, but this time they were mixed with something else, relief. The war had come to the cathedral, and the night was far from over. The cathedral seemed to breathe around them, the air heavy with incense and the faint, almost inaudible groan of old stone under pressure. Clara clutched Hope so tightly her knuckles whitened, her body trembling with a fear that threatened to undo her. Yet when Amicus stumbled into the nave, lit by flashes of lightning through the stained glass windows, her terror steadied, just slightly. He was bent, broken, bleeding, but he was alive. And his eyes, those scarred, haunted eyes, held the fire of a man who had walked through the abyss and returned with secrets no one should know. The doors slammed shut behind him as though unseen hands had pulled them tight. The shadows that had followed Clara outside lingered in the storm, pressing against the holy walls, whispering, waiting. Amicus' voice cut through the darkness. They won't enter until she calls them. Until the covenant is tested. Clara blinked, her lips trembling. She? Who are you talking about? The air shifted then, colder, heavier. From the altar, a figure emerged. Not mist this time, not illusion, but flesh. A woman draped in flowing black lace, her face hidden beneath a veil, her movements deliberate, every step echoing in the hollow silence. Hope stilled in Clara's arms. The baby's gaze locked on the veiled woman, and for the first time all night, she smiled. Clara's blood ran cold. The woman's voice was velvet, sharp, smooth, dripping with power. So this is the child the covenant spoke of. The eye-born one. Flesh of the living, sight of the dead. Amicus spat blood on the stone floor. Ngozi. His voice was raw, bitter. Clara's head snapped toward him. You know her? Lightning crashed through the stained glass, painting the woman's veil in shards of red and blue. She laughed, a sound that made the candles shudder in their holders. He knows me, she said. He knows me well. He was the first who tried to run, the first to fail. Clara stared between them, heart pounding. Emica, what is she talking about? But Emica's face told her everything before he could speak. The lines of guilt, of shame, of a burden carried too long. I was part of it, he said finally, voice trembling. Years ago, before you, before Hope. The covenant was not just for wealth, it was for blood, for heirs, for children who could see beyond. I thought I had escaped. But no one escapes Ngozi. The veiled woman lowered her head, almost in pity. You ran from your vow. You carried scars as your penance. And now, destiny has brought you back, to kneel before what you fled. Amicus staggered forward, shielding Clara and Hope with his battered frame. I won't kneel. Not this time. This instant. Ngozi tilted her head, and the shadows outside pressed harder against the cathedral walls, their whispers building into a deafening roar. Then let us see if your strength can hold against what is written. She raised her hand. The stained glass windows shattered all at once, shards raining down like crystal knives. The shadows poured in through the broken frames, flooding the cathedral with darkness that writhed and hissed, their forms half human, half nightmare. Clara screamed, shielding Hope as glass sliced across her arm. Emica roared, his scars igniting with a searing white light that pushed the shadows back momentarily. The battle had begun. The cathedral became a war zone. Pews splintered under the weight of unseen claws. Candles toppled, flames licking hungrily across ancient wood. The storm outside merged with the chaos inside until it felt like the whole world was collapsing in on them. Emica fought like a man possessed. His fists burned with light as he struck at the shadows, each blow sending them screeching back into the dark. But for every one he pushed away, two more slithered forward. Ngozi advanced slowly, untouched by the chaos, her veil never lifting, her steps unhurried. She was the storm's center, its calm, its commander. Clara tried to run, but the shadows coiled around her feet like living ropes, dragging her down. She clutched Hope higher against her chest, screaming as she kicked and thrashed. Let her go, Emica bellowed, hurling himself at the writhing darkness. His light seared them, but it wasn't enough. His strength was faltering, his body too broken to sustain the fight much longer. Ngozi's laughter rang through the cathedral. You think you can save her? Save them? This is beyond you, Emica. Beyond any of you. And then she spoke a word, not in any human tongue, but in something older, deeper. Hope shuddered. Clara felt it instantly. Her baby stiffened in her arms, her tiny hands curling into fists, her wide eyes glowing faintly. "No!" Clara screamed. She shook her, desperate to wake her from whatever spell had gripped her. But the glow only grew stronger, until it wasn't light coming from Hope's eyes anymore. It was the eye on her back. The supernatural eye opened fully. Its lid peeled back, slick and unnatural, revealing an iris that shimmered like molten gold, ancient and infinite. It blinked once, slow and deliberate, and the entire cathedral froze. Even the shadows recoiled. Ngozi's laughter stopped. For the first time, her voice faltered. "So it is true." The eye swiveled, independent of Hope's tiny body, staring directly at Ngozi. And Ngozi trembled. Clara sobbed, torn between terror and awe. She had never seen the eye open so fully, so completely alive. Hope herself seemed almost unconscious, her head lolling against Clara's chest, but the eye was awake and watching. Emeka dropped to his knees, his own scars dimming. He bowed his head low. "It has chosen," he whispered. "The child is the vessel. She holds the covenant's true power." Ngozi stepped back, her veil quivering. No, this was not how it was meant to be. She was supposed to be mine, to serve me." The eye blinked again. This time, the cathedral shook. Stained glass shards rose from the floor as though lifted by unseen strings, spinning in the air, catching the flicker of lightning. The shadows shrieked, their forms unraveling, dissolving into smoke as the golden gaze swept across them. Ngozi screamed, raising both hands as though to shield herself. The veil tore back, revealing her face, beautiful and terrible, ageless and cracked with power. But when the eye fell on her, her beauty shattered, her skin peeling into ash, her form collapsing inward. "No," she howled. "You cannot end me. I am eternal." But the eye watched without mercy, and Ngozi burned. Her screams echoed until they broke into silence. Her body crumbled to dust, scattering across the cathedral floor, her black lace falling empty to the stone. The shadows fled, evaporating into the storm. The air grew still. The battle was over. Clara fell to her knees, shaking, hope limp against her chest. The golden glow dimmed, the supernatural eye slowly closing as though it had never existed. "Please," Clara whispered, rocking her baby. "Please, wake up. Please." For a terrible moment, there was no sound, no movement. Then Hope stirred, her tiny chest rising and falling, her small cry breaking the silence. Clara's tears came in floods, relief overwhelming her. She kissed her daughter's head again and again, whispering prayers of gratitude, of fear, of love. Emeka dragged himself closer, collapsing beside them. His scars were dark now, lifeless. His strength was gone, but his eyes held peace Clara had never seen before. "You saved her," Clara whispered. He shook his head weakly. "No, she saved us all." Lightning flashed one final time outside, illuminating the cathedral, the shattered windows, the broken pews. Rain poured through the open wounds in the roof, washing the ashes of Ngozi into nothingness. The war was done, but Clara knew it was not the end. Days later, Lagos returned to its noise, its chaos, its restless rhythm. People whispered of the storm, of strange lights over Ikoyi, of a night where the city seemed to hold its breath. But life went on. Clara sat in a small, quiet room above a tailor's shop, Hope sleeping soundly beside her. She traced her fingers gently over the small back of her daughter, shivering as she felt the faint outline of the eye beneath the skin. Closed, hidden, but there. Her life was still fragile. She was still a mother alone in a city that would never understand. But she was no longer afraid, because she knew what Emeka had said was true. Hope was the beginning, and Clara would do whatever it took to protect her. Yet sometimes, in the dead of night, when the streets outside were quiet and the world seemed still, Clara swore she heard whispers again. Not threats, not warnings, but something else. The sound of the unseen, waiting, watching, and she would hold her daughter close, pressing her lips against her hair, whispering into the dark. "You will not have her. She is mine, always mine." But in the corner of the room, in the sliver of moonlight that spilled across the wall, a shadow would flicker, and the faint glimmer of a golden eye would blink once. Her story is not just a tale, it's a mirror of fear, of rejection, of survival, and of redemption. What would you have done if you were born with such a curse? Or was it truly a curse at all? If you were moved by this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And don't forget, our world is filled with mysteries, waiting to be told. This is Spiritual African Stories. Subscribe now, and let the next tale find you.